Westminster School is one of the oldest and most famous in the United Kingdom. Founded in the 14th century, its alumni include many well-known figures. It costs £34,000 a year to educate a child at Westminster, but if Labour win the next election, that tuition could rise to more than £40,000 every year.
That's because the Labour Party has promised to impose value-added tax, or VAT, which currently stands at 20% on private school fees. The policy aims to raise £1.5 billion to improve state schools and hire 6,000 new teachers in the public sector.
There's big question marks around how parents are going to react to this. Are parents going to stick with the school their child's at and keep paying the VAT on their fees? Or are the parents going to say, I'm sorry, it's just too much for me, and pull their child out of that school, which of course will mean the government doesn't get the VAT on those fees, and then the government has to pay to educate them in a state school instead.
Large schools like Eton, Harrow, or Winchester, where Prime Minister Rishi Sunak studied, are unlikely to be affected by the new tax. But most private schools are small, with less than 300 students, putting their survival at risk if, as some fear, parents pull their children out because they can't afford higher fees. Some of those parents have started the Education Not Taxation campaign, calling for a rethink. They say the tax is unfair on their children, will increase pressure on the state system, and question if it will raise the targeted amount.
Education is a social benefit and it should not be taxed. Number two, the parents who are sending their kids to the private school for whatever reason it might be, they are already contributing to the state schools through their taxes. We pay taxes to the economy and do not use that facility, therefore saving the taxpayer money.
There have been varying predictions about the impact of the policy on student movement, with some reports warning that a quarter or even up to half of private school students could transfer to the state sector. If that happens, the Adam Smith Institute think tank says the policy could potentially cost the government £1.5 billion. But the Labour Party is drawing on a different report by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, predicting that only 7% of students would make the switch. Labour says funds raised would tackle the crisis in teacher recruitment, improve school buildings, and offer better mental health support for students. For its part, Education Not Taxation says it wants to break the stereotype that private school parents are all wealthy and privileged.
There is a wrong perception that all parents from private schools are privileged and all parents from state school are not. That's not the case. We want to tell our story, and our story is the story of construction workers, of nurses, of doctors, of journalists, of small businesses. We are people for different reasons trying to send our children to a private school to do the best by them in the situation that we are in. We are not rich, we are not privileged. Please listen to us.
The latest census data from the Independent Schools Council showed a drop of 2.7% in private school enrollment this year, the biggest decrease since 2011. And a number of local councils have said they can't guarantee school places for pupils switching, with classrooms already full. But the Labour Party says the national birth rate is falling, so councils should be able to find places for those who need them. But these factors vary greatly across the country. Labour also says private schools have increased fees significantly over recent years and should absorb most of the tax rather than pass it on to parents.
The one thing which absolutely everybody agrees on is that we need more investment in state schools. When we have a teacher recruitment crisis, we cannot find enough teachers to go into our schools. We've got a teacher retention crisis. Even when we get teachers into government-funded schools, they seem to be leaving in ever-increasing numbers. We're finding it harder and harder to get graduates into teaching because they can go and earn more money doing other jobs because teacher salaries have been so poor for so long. And ultimately, everyone wants to see those situations reversed.
The debate surrounding the cost of education is not limited to schools, with some calling for university fees to be increased. Tuition fees for British students have been frozen at £9,250 sterling a year since 2017. But that's created a funding crisis for many universities, as costs and inflation have risen significantly.
As Election Day approaches, polls show widespread support for taxes on private schools. But when it comes to increasing university tuition fees, the public is a lot less convinced, with the majority opposing any hike. Karina Kamel, Al Arabiya English, London.